Viewers, all eyes are on G7 summit. Upon arrival in Evian in France, Prime Minister Narendra Modi shared on social media that he's looking forward to engaging with world leaders and exchanging views on key global issues. India remains committed to advancing collective efforts for a more sustainable and prosperous planet. So those are the visuals that we are getting at this point in time that you can see on your screens right now. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has arrived in France. It is India's moment at the G7 summit. Prime Minister Modi is going to be there along with other world leaders at the G7 round table. At 6:15 this evening, there's going to be official welcome by French President. Then from 6:45 p.m. till 8:45 p.m. this evening, there's a working meeting of G7 partner countries. From 8:50 till 9:50 in the evening, there's a bilateral meeting with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. That's going to be the top focus. Then there's going to be another bilateral meeting from 9:25 to 9:50 with UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Then from 10:05 to 10:30, there's a bilateral meeting with UAE President. Then on 17th of June, the focus is going to be on a dinner that's hosted by French President Emmanuel Macron for all the world leaders who have arrived in France for the crucial G7 summit. And let's also tell you a little bit about India's likely agenda, specifically during bilaterals. If you talk about India-Canada, then the India-Canada ties are going to be important. Then PM Carney's bilateral resetting of ties is something that will be on focus, and also how both countries can restore political engagements. Cooperation on trade and investment and education will be another area that the leaders are expected to talk about. They'll also be talking about the need to address security concerns and also how one can really strengthen people-to-people ties between India and Canada. Now, let's talk about another important bilateral that we'll be keeping our eyes on, and this is the India-UK bilateral. The focus will be India-UK ties. PM Keir Starmer will be meeting Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Bilateral implementation of India-UK free trade agreement is on the agenda. Expanding defense and technology cooperation is also on the agenda. A greater collaboration in innovation is also something that both leaders will be focusing on. Let's talk about India-UAE bilateral. The focus is going to be on strengthening trade and investment under CEPA, deepening cooperation in energy, infra, fintech, enhancing partnership in emerging technologies. Let's now focus on the ties between India and France. Then there is a dinner. Then the focus is going to be on diplomacy. Dinner and diplomacy is what we're going to be looking at. Strategic coordination on Indo-Pacific is going to be one highlight. Cooperation in defense, nuclear and energy, along with space, will be another key focus. There's going to be discussion on AI and climate action as well. So these are a couple of topics that leaders are expected to discuss when they sit together on the sidelines of the crucial G7 summit in France. Let's go across to my colleague Shrinjoy Chaudhary, who is joining us live right now for more on this. Shrinjoy, amidst the war, it is a very powerful, we can say, gathering of the world leaders for G7 summit. And of course, Donald Trump did try to address the elephant in the room by, coming to some kind of an agreement with Iran on peace deal. But our focus is also going to be on key bilaterals. Officially, is there, is any specific agenda with all these leaders that PM will have bilaterals with?
Yes, you've already mentioned many of the issues that will come up during the bilaterals with the UAE, Britain, and the Canadians. I mean, to begin with the Canadians, the fact that Carney was here, the fact that Carney wants an intermediate power dialogue, which means Canada, India, other countries, which will help to take the focus away from America and American economic pressure. The fact that Carney pointedly did not go to the Golden Temple in Amritsar suggests a reason for closer ties between India and Canada. And this is a relationship which is also important because Canada is one of the largest producers of oil and natural gas. Now, if the Canadians have oil and natural gas, keeping in mind the uncertainty that the Strait of Hormuz situation has had over the last 100 days, it's clearly important for India to have diverse areas to reach out to when it needs oil and natural gas. Canada clearly is one of them. As far as Britain is concerned, I mean, the relationship is so old and so long and been such a powerful one. The fact that Britain and India did a free trade agreement and other countries actually followed, other groupings, including EU, followed, suggests that much more remains to be done as far as trade is concerned with Britain. As far as the UAE is concerned, just to give 1 point each to the three, the UAE is concerned, look, the country has suffered in this fighting. There were attacks on the UAE. So the fact that this meeting is taking place is a way of telling the UAE that, look, we have lots and lots of Indians in your country, maybe 30 lakh or so, and we are with you. You have suffered because of the war. Your projects, your assets were attacked, and Indians also were there, but we are with you. So these are the three countries that Prime Minister has dealings with today. Of course, there is a meeting coming up with the US President Donald Trump, and that's going to be a very significant meeting. They haven't met for a long time in person. They've had chats on the phone, but this is the first time they're meeting in perhaps a year and a bit.
Right. Stay on with us, Shanjoy. In fact, viewers, the 52nd G7 summit is all set to begin in Evian in France this evening, bringing together leaders of the world's leading democracy. And speaking on the sidelines of the G7 summit, US President Donald Trump said that America has done a deal with Iran and it should be successful. He made a striking remark about Iran, saying he never cared about regime change, but suggested that such a change may now be taking place in the country. Listen in.
We have our deal done with Iran, and it should be successful. It goes to a second stage, which I think will be actually easier. The biggest thing is they will not have a nuclear weapon, and that's the reason I got in, and that's the reason I agreed to sign. They will not develop, purchase, buy, or any other thing. They're not going to acquire a nuclear weapon. If they do, all hell will rain down on them. And they're not going to do that,
Let's go back to Shanjoy Chaudhary, who continues to be with us at this point in time. Shanjoy, Donald Trump, the US president, has arrived for the G7 summit and clearly making his presence felt there. But very interesting comments he made about Iran. I want to talk to you specifically about how he has said that he never cared about regime change. I mean, then what was this war really for?
It's important to look and here look back and see what President Trump said on the 28th of February and shortly afterwards. That apart, he did mention that Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. Well, Iran has signed the NPT, and if you sign the NPT, it's very clear that you have agreed not to have a nuclear weapon. That said, it also must be pointed out that Iran enriched its uranium, those 400 plus kilos, to 60%. Now, if you want to use enriched uranium for, let's say, nuclear medicine or something like that, then about 20% is really all you need. The Iranians themselves have said that they did it to threaten people. Well, now we shall see what happens to the uranium, because all those 400 plus kilos, where are they going to be? Will they be with the Iranians? Will they go to the Americans? Will it be handed over to the IAEA? Or we have to see what happens to the uranium. Now that President Trump has said what he did, now it's important to know where this uranium, these 400 kilos of uranium, for which people fought for 39 days, where will it go?
Absolutely, and we will have to see what eventually is there in the final plan that both sides have really agreed to. I'm talking about the peace plan that Trump is talking about between US and Iran. For now, thank you very much, Ranjoy, for joining us with your inputs on this story. Viewers, Times Now's managing editor, Zaka Jacob, currently is in France, tracking all the developments from there. And here's a report that he sent to us earlier today, giving us a sense of what can really be expected from this G7 meeting.
We're coming to you from the hillside town of Evian-le-Bain, which is in the northern Alps, the northern part of France. We're right now on Lake Geneva, which separates Switzerland and France. On that side is the beautiful city of Lausanne, and then about 40 kilometers from there is Geneva, which of course is the prettiest city in Switzerland, many would say, just on this lake, this beautiful lake that separates France and Switzerland. On my back, you can see the beautiful French Alps, some of the highest peaks here. Yesterday we were speaking to a cab driver and he said one of the highest peaks, if not the highest peak, it's called Mont Blanc, is snow-capped throughout the year. Every season of the year you can find snow on top of Mont Blanc, including right now in the middle of June, where we are coming to you live from Evian-le-Bain. Clearly, you know, it's very hot. It feels like 40 degrees, and yet you can see the snow-capped French Alps. It is this which is going to be the setting for the G7 leaders meeting, which is officially underway now with the dinner that was hosted by French President Emmanuel Macron. Donald Trump, the US president, arrived on Monday evening here in Geneva, and then subsequently he's headed out to Evian-le-Bain, where the G7 has kicked off. Tomorrow and day after, Prime Minister Modi will be attending as part of the outreach of G7 partner countries. India is one of the partner countries, along with Egypt, South Korea and Brazil. This G7 is absolutely crucial. It's quintessential because it comes in the backdrop of the conclusion of the peace agreement between America and Iran, bringing to an end that 100-day-old war. But questions still remain as to whether the tenets of the agreement, whether the clauses of the agreement will be honored by all parties, not just by America and Iran, but there is also a third party in the form of Israel, and already you're seeing voices of dissent from some of the more right-wing elements or constituents of Bibi Netanyahu's government, saying that they will not honor this agreement, and this agreement basically leaves Israel to fend for itself. We will be reporting for you for the next 3 days here on Times Now from this beautiful locale. Like I said, Switzerland on the one side, France on the other, one of the most beautiful places on planet Earth, and that is going to be the venue for one of the most important discussions seen in geopolitical reality in the last few months. So this is Zaka Jacob along with camera person Rajkishore Mal reporting for Times Now.